6:31. Call this regular meeting of the Chavano Park City Council to order. Buddy Alleman will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, to be followed by the invocation led by Pete Miller. If you'd all please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, remind us of the rippling effect that small acts of kindness can have in this world. We ask you for your wisdom and your grace to become the light in the darkness, to become the calm in the storm, and become the peace in the chaos. Help us be mindful of the power that lies within each of us. Guide us to harness our abilities for the greater good, to inspire and uplift those around us. Help us to remain steadfast in our pursuit, knowing that with faith and determination, we can transform our potential into meaningful action. In your name we pray.
Amen. Brings us to item 3, citizens to be heard. Dave Marn, come on down. If you'd give your name and where you live, please.
And it won't take me 3 minutes to say anything that you could do to make this happen would be greatly appreciated by the majority of people in the city. Not of who I speak for, but at least the majority of the people at 211 Hunters Branch Street South would like to not have to climb over fences and over bushes to get to the trail.
Linear Park.
The linear park, and this would be great. That was it. Thank you very much for everything you do. And I saw in the future was the city manager's contract and salary. He earns twice what you pay him.
Yeah, we could put that on the consent agenda as well, I suppose. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item number 4, city council comments. Buddy.
Just good evening, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody here. Thanks.
Maggie?
Glad we all had a good sunshiny day today, and I hope all our citizens make good use of it.
Pete?
Yeah, a warm welcome to everybody. I'd also like to recognize the Methodist Hospital Landmark. So this hospital actually donated the purchase of 300 poinsettias to the women's organization, which made a big difference in their fundraiser that they had over the Christmas holidays. And they actually donated another 5,000 or 4,500, 5,000, I don't know the exact number, but around that amount to the city in order for the festivities for the holidays. So just want a shout out to them, the Methodist Hospital Landmark, and just for appreciation for all they've done for this city.
Thank you. Lee?
I'd like to thank everybody in attendance and those who might be watching electronically now or maybe a little bit later recorded. And I'd like to point out the fact that our country and the world leaders need our prayers, and I'd like to put out a request for prayers for the Pope, that he heal very quickly and come back to his duties. And I'm sure we're all watching with anticipation how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Brings us to item number 5, presentations, commendations, and announcements. 5.1, proclamation recognition of March 3rd through 7th, 2025 as an Employee Appreciation Week. Employee appreciation. There are 2 special groups in Chavano Park that make this a really, really wonderful place for our citizens. And Pete was just talking about one of those groups, the Chavano Park Women, and our employees. And together, y'all bring your A game every day for our community. And you make it a much more special place than folks that are just down the road. Chavano Park is a place where I hope people feel like they have stepped back in time, a place where there's community, where there's collegiality between neighbors, where folks are happy to look over the fence and to go through each other's fences and enjoy the sense of community with barbecues and all the other things that go on. Now, I will say that as I say those things, that National Night Out will be here in October, and I will not blame anybody for skipping their neighborhood National Night Out to go to Wagon Trail and get to listen to Jimmy Childress, because Jimmy and Myrna put on the most entertaining progressive country that I have ever heard. Jimmy Childress is quite a musician. So if you see Jimmy, tell him that we'd like for him to be up here at the pavilion and provide some great entertainment for all of us. Item number 6. All matters listed under this item are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired by any alderman on any item, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately at the end of the regular agenda items. Do we have a motion to approve and/or accept items 6.1 through 6.6? We have a motion from Maggie and a second from Lee. There being no objection, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item number 7, all matters listed under this item are considered routine by the City Council and will not be considered, and will only be considered at the request of one or more aldermen. Coincident with each item, discussion will generally occur. If there is a request to pull any of items 7.1 through 7.5 from the city manager's report, those will be considered at the end of the regular agenda. Do we have any request to pull any of item 7? There being no request, brings us to item number 8, regular agenda items. Item 8.1, discussion action. Reviewing possible Cliffside Salado Creek Trail options in connection to the municipal trail head located in the vicinity of City Hall, considering Resolution R 2025-006, approving the MPO Alternative Transportation Grant application. Bill, it looks like you're on your own.
I am, and we passed with the engineer, told him that we think we could handle this. But as you all know, master plans as early as 1999 and followed up by the 2010 town plan, the 2018 town plan, and the 2023 town plan all discuss hike and bike trails, sidewalks, systems that connect pedestrian and bicycle traffic safely. Beginning last year, we discussed whether we wanted to pursue the next step associated with Salado Creek. It was part of our objectives in the budget, and we gave some more thought and options associated with that. You know, on January 20 last month, it was January 27th. City Council approved option 3A, which gave guidance to the staff to continue preparation for an Alamo area MPO grant. So after that occurred, we looked at the three options. There's two things that happened. One is we thought we needed to come back with the three options to get some clarification. And more importantly, in order to submit the grant, we have to submit it in conjunction with a resolution from City Council approving the grant. So that's what we're here to do. So I'm just going to pause a second before I start going into the slides. So this is about the resolution, but it's also, before I get started, we've created a new course option. So we had three options last time. We ditched one, and we have another one, and we're going to go back to that. So first slide. Okay. Again, there's $14.6 million on the table. Our project has to be $1 million to be considered. There's a 20% match. After tonight's meeting, based upon the guidance, we will submit the initial project eligibility within the next week. And then there's a review process. Final applications are due, and I suspect that that's going to be taking a look at what we proposed. If it doesn't meet certain standards, they're going to ask us to recalibrate it and redo that. And I think that that whole process will continue to go on even after approval. My discussions with Chris Otto, the engineer, said that they've been associated with a couple of these projects, and that subsequent to even approval, they come back and they refine the requirements and make certain things happen. So this final option that you vote now will not be final, I'm sure. Next slide. But we have three options. Option one is the same as what we briefed you last time. We did spice up the slides a little bit so that it's a little bit clearer. We have some color code. So where it shows in yellow is a trail and/or bike lane. The green is the proposed trailhead, and the red line is the existing sidewalk bike lanes that already exist that would connect the trailhead parking area to the trail system. And in this case, just to review the bidding, at the curb, at the dog leg and the curb at Cliffside, there's 200 or 400 feet that we need to build or make an improvement to the existing Salado Creek San Antonio Trail. Then their proposal is along the east side of Cliffside, which is the far side, there's no residential houses, we would put another 10-foot hike-bike trail that would be in the existing right-of-way. And then the last part of the trail system, there's three options. Option one is this windmill option, which just goes straight down the windmill to Northwest Military Highway. And then there's the parking trailhead. All three options have the cliffside as the same, and the trailhead is the same. The only difference is the connections between the parking area to the cliffside. So this one is the simplest one because you got wagon trail there, and if you're looking at it, there's a total on both sides of the road of 19 houses on Windmill and 10 houses on the north side, which is what's being proposed, that would be directly affecting a residence yard. So 10 directly, 19 indirectly because you got the other side of the road. Okay, next slide. Option 2 basically takes the end of the cliffside, you cross the street and you pick it back up, and then you put a 5-foot bikeway path along cliffside to where it turns into Saddle Tree, and you go shoot straight down Saddle Tree. And again, that option directly affects 17 bike lane properties in the right-of-way. So the previous one was 10, this is 17, but it also includes 35 total residents on both sides, okay? So the recommendation is going to be option 1. This is kind of a fallback option 2, depending on what TxDOT comes back to us from. Next slide. This is the option originally that the engineer thought that he would have the greatest chance of TxDOT approval. And the only difference is that the previous option we showed you last month was a 10-foot bike and hike path, and we've reduced it to 5 feet. And the reduction to 5 feet is because we believe that that was going to be more amenable to the residents and is less intrusive on the right-of-way. And it may be something that TxDOT will say, no, we won't consider anything less than 10 feet, but right now our going in position is 5 feet. This option is similar in terms of impact on the residents. It's a total of 34 residents on both sides of the proposed route. 19 residents directly affected in the right-of-way, where it's 5 feet additional would, that's the proposal, would be imposed into the existing right-of-way, which people are mowing lawns there now, and they think it's their yard mostly, but there's usually a 10-foot right-of-way that is public right-of-way that people take ownership of. So that's the three options in a nutshell. I think I got another slide here. The trailhead, we hadn't talked about that, but talking to, brainstorming Curtis and I, and talking to the engineer, this is more than just a parking area. There would be benches there, there would be bike racks, probably a public drinking fountain, a dog drinking fountain, information kiosk, emergency call box, things like that that would be upgrades that make it more of a trailhead rather than a parking lot. I don't think we briefed you that. Okay, so you can see that information there. Next slide. Cost estimates. This is new. What we got to is trail option 1 is essentially $1 million. We're going to round that up to $1 million. It says 998 now, but it's going to be really $1 million. One of the things that Alderman Miller asked me about, and we clarified, is that developmental costs, engineering costs associated with the project aren't included in the $1 million and can't be included in the 20% cost sharing. So I don't anticipate this is going to be a great engineering cost because it's fairly simple, but there will be engineering costs associated with it that we'll have to absorb from there. So $1 million, we upped the cost of the trailhead because we want the amenities to go into that. Option 2 are actually very similar. They're not very far off in terms of cost or on disruption to properties associated with it. I think there's some challenges with option number 3 because you're going through you're going through people's backyards in a utility right-of-way, which are not easily monitored, right? People going up and down the road on a 5-foot bike lane, they're observable by people driving in and out all the time. There's no covered, concealed areas where it's blocked from public view. And so there's that period of, there's that section on option 3 where you're going about a quarter mile at least between Fawn Drive and Windmill to where it's in people's side and backyards and it's not publicly viewed by the broader public, and that could cause concerns associated with it. That's why we're opting more out of option 3 when it seemed like that would be the perfect place to put a trail. I just think there's more problems with that.
Okay, thank you, Bill. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution R 2025-006, authorizing a MPO transport alternative grant application for, and you specify the option.
So moved.
Which option?
Option 1.
Option 1, Maggie? Second?
Option 1.
Option 1, okay.
I'm sorry.
We are now open for discussion. Do we have any questions or comments, concerns? Pete?
So, Bill, I'm always a firm believer to plan the work and work the plan. If you go back to the recent city plan that was put together, there's actually, on page 57, it actually shows a diagram of what was proposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. To me, a big selling point and something that I hope we don't overlook is the fact that not only does it connect the one trail that we're talking about, but it connects all the trails up north, and it's more of a holistic plan. To me, that's a big selling point. So if I'm the city of San Antonio and looking at this, and I also see that you're connecting the top sections, that would be a big selling point to me. So has that been given consideration, and what are your thoughts on that?
I think that you've highlighted a great point that we need to emphasize, and I think that's, that provides a broader level of support that we're just not winging this, that this is something that's very deliberate. The other thing that I've initiated already is I've sent a letter to our adjacent city council men that's, I think, in District 8, Manny Perez. I've sent a letter asking for support from San Antonio. And I pointed out that in 2014, we entered into a land swap and where we provided city limits that enabled them to do the trailhead. We also Denton, as part of Denton Properties, they gave and donated 20 or 30 acres, and there was a 1.88 area in San Antonio that they redesignated City of Chavano Park for the explicit purpose of creating a trailhead there in the future. And I provided that document, the memorandum of agreement that was signed between the City of Chavano Park and the City of San Antonio as an attachment with the current plan. So I also sent a request to our Bexar County Commissioner for support, and I can't remember if there was a fourth one. There seems to be a fourth one that's.
Yeah, well, Brandon and TxDOT and
Oh, yeah, TxDOT.
Manny and Grant. Those are
Yeah.
the people that we
The
contacted.
director of their trail system, I sent a letter to. I personally talked to him on the phone about it, so he had a heads up on it. TxDOT, because we're proposing to use existing TxDOT between the trailhead and the bike path, and then again, TxDOT and the city representatives and the county representative.
Yeah, Pete.
So I always look for opportunities that cross. And to me, this seems like another opportunity that when you look at the fiber optics that we've been talking about, does this have an opportunity to basically run the fiber optics along the trail in order to service the community on that side? I know that's one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that we've had difficulties with getting fiber optics to that area.
Yes, and so I think that this provides an opportunity that if we don't have an existing company that that's ready to put fiber optics in, is we could do what's commonly done all the time is put a conduit in there, which would then be, it might actually even have a drawstring in there that's pre-existing to where if someone in the future for any reason wanted to put any kind of cable or a fiber optics in it, the infrastructure would be set and it would be easy to pull through from there. So that's a good option. We should consider that.
The last question that I have is actually understanding how the finances work. So in the description, it says that we first have to do the expenditures and then we get reimbursed. So is that as we go along? So once we finish a section of it and we get our bills, do we get reimbursed at that time, or do we get reimbursed when the project is complete?
I have to do a little bit more research on that to get specific. What we've done in the past with several similar projects, but not exactly this project, is we are able to get reimbursement as you go through and you invoice it. That's what I would expect to happen from that standpoint. I wouldn't expect to have to go and wait to the end to do it.
Okay, Lee?
Bill, does a map exist of what's going to be down across the street at the trailhead? How many parking spaces? How many whatevers?
There is an initial concept that has been briefed maybe it was a year ago or 8 months ago to City Council. It says parking area may look like this. So there was a couple options associated with that.
Yeah.
For the purpose of this grant drill, I don't believe we need to provide that much detail.
Okay, and as I recall, we can't do a curb cut on Military. It's going to have to be down the road at the end of the property. Is that?
We had not finalized that. We were talking about the possibilities. There is a curb cut right now.
Okay.
And the issue is that where the U driveway is to the adjacent properties, like 3/4 of it is in the city's property, and 1/4 of it is in their property. And so the idea is it's not infeasible at all that we couldn't just improve that curve cut and then also work in collaboration with that property owner to improve their driveway and use that. It would be something in the future we'd have to determine, but there would certainly be an opportunity to put a curve cut on Saddle Tree, which would facilitate a flow of the traffic.
As I recall, you were at that previous meeting some 8 or 9 months ago, you were talking about how it was split there. Seems like the perfect way of doing things. I mean, it's already done. We don't have to pay a lot. And if they're amenable to improving their own driveway, seems like a no-brainer.
And just in full disclosure, we have not had a discussion with either one of the adjacent property owners, and maybe we should do that. Actually, we need to do that just so they have a heads up. And we're not submitting a grant and then all of a sudden 6 months later, what are you talking about? You didn't even talk to me about this. So that's a great point. I'll put it on my list of things to do.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Buddy?
Bill, just a couple of questions. Moving forward, what's the period of time for mobilization once this process starts? How long will it take them to make a decision? And what are we going to do to roll this out as far as, like you said, talking to the neighbors, to the adjacent property, as well as informing the neighborhood, the residents of the area? Are we going to have public hearing, or how is it we're going to communicate to the citizens on what's going on through their neighborhood?
Yeah, I probably need to provide you some options as a city council and then allow us to think through how to best approach the communications with the citizens for sure. In terms of the timing, when the Northwest Military Highway project was initiated and approved, the planning had not been done in detail, the engineering. And that engineering took 3 years, I think. I could be off a little bit. And then it took another 6 months to get to where it was awarded, mobilized, and started. And so the engineering for this is not near as complicated. And so it should be relatively simple with very few utility conflicts. I think it could be done very quickly, but I think it's a matter of working through, and it's an MPO project, federally funded. Same thing was, TxDOT would have some sort of approval process. We'll have to then get more refined guidance on that, but feasibly it could be a year, or it might be 2 that we get started.
Yeah, think about what we were just talking about on De Zavala. Because we're not entirely within the footprint of the existing asphalt, we have to go in and get an antiquities examination on that. That's going to take a month or so. At that point, the engineers know what they've got. We've pretty well eliminated all the bar ditches that are out there, and makes it a little bit easier. So we would be going in and putting in, excavating. Frank's really good at excavating. He really likes that, and I really commend him every time I see him. But we wouldn't be using Frank to do that, although he would love to do that. And then we'd be putting down the base that would be necessary. Now, Bill, in talking about this, in one place you talked about using concrete. Are we talking about concrete for Windmill? Are we talking about concrete for Chavano, for Cliffside? Are we talking about concrete for everything?
In my mind right now, we're talking concrete on Cliffside and connecting to Salado Creek, and then asphalt down Windmill, or the route that we used, to be similar to the existing pavement and make it a bike lane.
And so it'll have a header curb or a ribbon curb? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think we'll have to work through that with the TxDOT, but I would think if we could make a ribbon curb and keep the existing ribbon curb, that almost serves as a lane delineation marker, and then you put another one there and you see the lane pretty well. Oh, I have a picture of I think there's a picture. So again, this is in Elm Creek, and they have a bike lane marked, it's marked in white, and then they got a curb, so you can kind of see it's very simple. They have to repaint that line occasionally. We actually would have an existing line that looks like a curb, because we do have a 6-inch curb there. And then whether we chose to paint it or how we marked it, I think that's part of the things we're gonna have to work out.
Okay. Conrad?
Was follow up with that discussion, and I apologize for being late to everybody. It's been a great day. Would we add on to the road, to the outside of the road? It would just be 5 feet increment inside, or 5 feet inside, 5 feet outside.
Discussing that internally, and then with the engineer, we would add on 5 feet plus whatever the curb was. So it might be, there would have to be some sort of curb at the end of that.
So it'd be a road addition with addition to.
Yes, sir.
And we're only presenting option 1. Is that correct?
We're gonna submit option 1, and then we're gonna get a hold of whoever the POCs are for TxDOT and validate. We might, before we actually hit send, call them and talk to them and work through that. But they may allow us to do 2 options. Or they may get option 1 and say, this isn't gonna work, and so you gotta come back and retool it. So
So you'll talk to them, they'll say if they say bring 2 options, you'll do that.
Okay. Okay, Bill, my question is affecting yards. Yeah, we just did all of this stuff down Windmill. Do we actually have a good handle on where everybody's property line is?
there was a survey done with this project that already exists. So the ability of the engineers to take the existing survey and the as-built plans, it's gonna be relatively easy. I have not looked at them with the engineers specifically to say, confirm the north or the south side and which one's best. So at this point in time, that's where we are.
Golly, I'd hate for us to get to the point of, golly, this sounds really great, and then have to say, oh, we'd have to condemn part of somebody's front yard. That would be very difficult.
Yeah, okay.
And
well,
so
we'll-
we
we'll-
want to make sure that we have that legal right, that it is our road right-of-way that we're working within.
And I feel pretty confident that it is. I will double check. And I say that because, the area that was the most out of line was Wagon Trail, where that road meandered close to the actual boundary.
Or over it.
And yeah, so we may have to confirm Cliffside too, but we'll go from there.
Cliffside.
On the backside.
I thought we owned all of the backside.
We do, but there's a survey that exists on that too. I just need to look at that.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have, Lee?
Mr. Mayor, I've heard it said we've got the legal right to do this, and surveys exist, and we have access to it. At what point do we publish the proposed route so that people with that X number of houses on each side come to awareness that they're quiet street with nobody doing bicycles and trotting along in front of their house? All of a sudden, they're getting a dump of people and bicycles. When do we do that so we can have input from the people affected?
Well, and that's a great question, Lee. We currently use all of that stuff. And the moment, and Conrad can probably speak to this better than all of us because he lives right at that dog leg. At the point that we open up Cliffside at the dog leg, my house is going to have more stuff go by it. The fire department's going to have more people driving by it. Windmill's going to have more people. Ben Oak, maybe not as much because it's harder to get to Ben Oak. Cliffside is going to have more people riding their bikes down there to get to the linear park. Do I think that we're going to be bringing people from San Antonio that are going to say, golly, this is the best thing since sliced bread? Only if the Huebner and the 1604 parking lots are perpetually full would they even consider coming to Chavano Park. To the extent that we're talking about our neighbors, those streets are currently used quite often by our neighbors. I was out Sunday and I must have seen 50 people walk by my house. But I think we're going to find that there's going to be a heightened sensitivity at the point that you have a bike lane that goes in front of somebody's house. It's going to be like, these people were never here before. Well, we just never paid attention to how many people were there. When is the right time to go out and tell people? If the answer is no, then the answer, until we reach a point that we're willing to commit the money, there is no project. It's all speculative. And if we're not going to get the money, then at some point, I think that we will come along and we will do Cliffside. We will find the money in the budget, and then everybody's going to realize, wow, all these people that live on the west side of Chavano Park are driving through my neighborhood. And the answer is yes. It's our neighborhood. It's not your neighborhood. It's our neighborhood. I don't know that I would, that's a good point on when to approach people. If the answer is no, then you just swatted a hornet's nest potentially, unnecessarily. And if the answer is yes, we still have the ability to say, no, this is a hornet's nest, we're not going to do that.
You managed to answer the question and give me another one to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have stopped talking sooner.
It's all right. I know the nature of the beast. When we opened up down next to Conrad's house, I mean, Bill and I walked that, 3 years ago? We went down and took a look at it. Bill had some great ideas then that I can see part of it in what we're talking about tonight. That's absolutely going to happen. Concrete, because of the occasional flood that go down there, asphalt will just go away. That's all great and good. I'm talking about designating a trailhead across the street in the middle of our city, and we're almost entirely residential, so no matter how they get there, they're going to be walking in front of X number of houses. I just want to make sure that the citizens out here understand that there would be bicycles when none existed before, and people, there will be more of them. Personally, I think, this is a great idea, overdue.
Yeah.
But I've had cranky neighbors once in a while in my life, and they'll raise hell after it's too late to put an eraser on it.
Yeah.
So let's not get to the point, my suggestion, to where we have to do a hasty retreat.
Well, as far as the utilization of a parking lot, we are at a loss for parking. One of the 50 weeks a year on a Sunday, there are people up here for the market. And Bill and Pete have told me that it's the second most popular market in Bexar County. And I don't know how many of those are our citizens, but I know that when I go through that periodically, that I'm recognizing about 25% of them, and I don't know everybody in Chavano Park. And so I don't know whether it's just the 25% of the people that I know that have gone, and I can't imagine that. So I'm thinking that there's actually, our citizens are holding on to that market. They really like that. Then when we do our political seasons, to the extent that we have runoffs, that adds about another 30 days with runoffs where there's actually voting here. And I can't imagine our older citizens saying, golly, we don't want to vote at Chavano Park anymore. And I would hate for them to come to that decision. On top of that, we've got court night, which means that we've got another 12 nights that are where our parking is completely inadequate, and then we've got another 6 or so community events, and then on top of those community events, sometimes people utilize our pavilion that have more people than the 78 parking spaces that are available on this tract right now. Pete has pointed out that we need more parking. And I agree with Pete. We need more parking. And until the Toothberry comes up with a better location, that location that we control across the street is our best option for today. Do I think that that's going to be where people are going to park to go on the linear park? I don't think so. I think that Pete's going to get on his bike, or Peter Kilpatrick and his lovely bride are going to get on their bikes at Willowwood, and they're going to go across to Wagon Trail, cut across Wagon Trail to Chavano Drive, come across Chavano Drive over to Fawn and then go down to Cliffside and then come back around. I don't know how much utilization Windmill is going to be getting other than from people that are in the estates.
Thank you,
But I
Mr.
think that once we submit this and we talk to the MPO and TxDOT, it's likely that we'll bring this back to City Council in March. And then that really may be a time, either immediately afterwards, where, because there's a second application period that's, I can't remember the date, but probably the word will be out. There's, David Martin found out about this, and then there's a number of residents actually that have called me, and they're very supportive of this. And they've heard rumors out there, so there's already discussion out there from that standpoint. So
It's overdue.
we do
need
want
this.
to, at the right time, consider it and then make sure it's out.
And it won't affect my house at all.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments, concerns? Okay, we have a motion to approve Resolution R 2025-006, authorizing an MPO transport alternatives grant application for option 1. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dave. And Dave, and by the way, thank you because you helped us on this linear park. You and I worked on this. We talked to Howard Peak a gazillion years ago in the very first meeting back there to tell him he's got a bottleneck and he needs to work with Chavano Park. So yeah.
makes a little bit of a difference, and the buy-in from the other, whether it be the Grant Moody, approving, or the person from 8, this would be a way, you have a number of retired military people, and you could get to Camp Bullis, to the medical facility there, through the linear park, and not be walking along Northwest Military in danger, and all of that stuff would be put in there, and then,
Well, please talk to Bill about some of those thoughts. I appreciate it. Brings us to item 8.2, discussion action, proposed change in the oak wilt prevention tree trimming season to July through January of each year. Randy,
Hey.
thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, and thanks for allowing me to speak on behalf of the City of Chavano Park's Citizens Tree Committee. I'll try to be brief, as I told some of the guys. It's my wedding anniversary, and my lovely bride said, "Don't be long-winded." So just as a little preface, the committee, the Citizens Tree Committee, consists right now of 9 citizen volunteers, and we meet 6 to 8 times per year. And basically, we discuss how we can create and promote activities to enhance what we would call our urban tree canopy and try to protect that. And I think everyone would agree that Chavano Park certainly has a great tree canopy. One of the challenges we have is that that's also predominantly live oak trees, and live oak trees are the primary target of this oak wilt disease that's very prevalent in the hill country and in our area. As far as the tree committee goes, our main event's Arbor Day. It'll be April 12th, as you probably know, so please come on out and support the event. We'll have some expert tree knowledge there, in addition to some other events for children and for adults as well that promote nature in Chavano Park. So just a little background to where we're at with oak wilt. The committee itself, for some of you who weren't here at that time or aware of that time, was formed about 10 years ago in response to an oak wilt outbreak that occurred within Chavano Park. And not coincidentally, that was on my property. And at that time, we sought the advice of a local Texas, our local Texas A&M Forest Server expert. His name was Mark Duff. He's now retired. And he was really the go-to guy within this area that would tell you, here's what you need to do. And so we got to know him pretty well and tried to mitigate the outbreak that we had. And as you may or may not be aware, what we did was we ended up creating a trench around my yard, basically, and through other neighbors' yards to sever the root connection between what they would call a mott, which is a tangle of roots that live oak trees all connect to. Conceptually, what that does is it keeps that disease from spreading from basically one area to another. And so that was 10 years ago or so. And at this point, there's no visible signs that it's creeped outside of that. So that's one of the things that you have to do to try to control an oak wilt outbreak. The other things that you can do to control oak wilt outbreaks is just not have it in the first place. So at the same time, we updated or created ordinances that would limit the number of months when you could actually trim your oak trees in conjunction with the recommendations from Texas A&M Forest Service, as well as a few other things like how to paint wounds, when to paint wounds, and how to sanitize equipment, and also update our permitting process that we have for both citizens and contractors. So at that time, Mr. Duff recommended that we restrict certain months. And at that time, we chose really to allow tree trimming to occur from July through September, and then from December through January. So we really today only have 5 months where someone in the city of Chatham Park can legally, within ordinance, trim their trees. Since that time, Texas A&M Forest Service has now updated their recommendations, and now they say that you can actually trim your trees from July through the month of February. So there was a gap there in October and November, which we currently don't allow tree trimming, but now Texas A&M Forest Service does say that that's okay within their guidelines. So because of that, we talked about it within our tree committee, and we like the fact that, that we've been very proactive and somewhat prohibitive about what you can do, but we want to take the recommendation of experts. I mean, we talk about it a lot, but we're not the biologists that make up those rules. And so Texas A&M Forest Service has now given us a different recommendation, and our ordinance is really not in lockstep with that. So we took a vote and unanimously would like to recommend to the council that you do change our oak tree trimming months to be the same as what Texas A&M recommends. There's some side benefits to that. They produce a lot of content that we can use to distribute that talk about these things too. And right now, we can't do that because they say do it these months, and we say, well, our months are different. The other thing is people move here from other cities, from city of San Antonio, and they're like, well, that's not what we had there. So we really just want to be consistent about our message, and because the buy-in is the best part of what we get. We don't want to just have to go around looking for people breaking the rules. We want them to understand the rules and then follow those rules, and that's the best that we can do, again, to stay consistent with this. So we'd like you to review and consider the requests of the ordinance change just to be consistent with what's already being recommended by the state.
Randy, thank you very much. Bill, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to prepare amendments to move the city's oak trimming season to match the Texas A&M Forest Service recommendation of July 1 to January 31. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
from Pete and a second from Conrad. We're now open for discussion. Lee?
I've gotten a permit every year for the last couple of years to take care of mine, and I don't remember how it was styled, but if it is January 1 through December 31 now, I would say that we should just make it for the rightful season. A permit anywhere in that or before that would be good for that time. That would be printed right on. They can look at it and see that these months enumerated are the correct ones. That would be a simple thing for simple minds like mine.
Well, that may be just too simple for us to implement, Lee, just saying. But staff can come back when they come back to our recommendations. Any other questions or comments, concerns? But I like your point, Pete.
Yeah, Bill, so I think this is an important issue, and Randy, I appreciate your presentation and you bringing this forward, especially for somebody that's had oak wilt in their house right there, or their property. I know it's a big deal, but Bill, I'd like to understand a little bit more about compliance. So we have roughly over 1,400 homes within Chavano Park. They all have trees. So in this past year, how many permits were pulled for oak wilt or for trimming trees?
For the calendar year the fiscal year 23-24, there were about 350. It was 346. And so if you do the math, that's 25% of the 1,400 houses have pulled permits. So some years it's more than 350, some years it's slightly less.
And have we given out any fines?
We do about one a year. We usually do 5 or 6 warnings a year. And obviously, most people are not aware of that. They get told you need to stop. They stop, and then they go get a permit, and we go from there. The fines are mostly focused in on tree trimming companies. They get warned, and then they know better, then they get caught again, and then we're harsh on them with the fine.
So I'm going to go back to Randy. Randy, to me, this is to understand the issue and making sure that people within Chavano comply, right? Because I don't want my oak trees to be affected. So how do we drive that? Is the fines the way to do it? Is the education? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, really, it's a combination of all of those things. I don't think anyone really recommends fining people because people obviously are very resentful of that kind of activity. So the best that we can do is, and what we try to do in the tree committee is come up with more touches as it would be where people will see what we're talking about. And the easier it is to understand that, the easier it is to basically get that out there. So if the idea is that you can't do it within a consecutive 5 months, it's a lot easier to tell someone that than say, oh, you can do it in July, but you can't do it in October, but you can again in January. That's just a little bit choppy. But to expand upon your question is, we want to leverage some information that hasn't really been out there. We've been having to create things on our own, and that's a little bit difficult for as small of a municipality as we are. And if you look at a site now called texasoakwilt.org, I think the Forest Service has recognized that too. So they've created quite a bit of different types of publications, if you want to call them. So we can print a one-page brochure. What we started doing is trying to attend city events. So if you would think like if we do trunk or treat, we'll take something that's more of a leaflet size and put it in a bag with candy and hand it to everyone. And so as many ways as we can come up with, we can do it. We just want to have the materials to be able to do that. City of San Antonio has actually gone and done door-to-door hangers with this information, and they do that in conjunction with their brush and bulk pickup. So when they come around in the City of San Antonio, whatever contractor they use puts 2 door hangers on. One says, here's your bulk pickup date. The other says, here's tree trimming practices and when you should do it and how you should do it. So we've talked about doing that too. We don't really have, again, having the materials helps us. And then we've talked about using volunteers, maybe Boy Scout troops, whatever it may be, to do something similar if we can. So the more touches we can get, the better it'll work, I think.
Thank you, Randy. There being no further, Maggie.
I have a question, just a comment. So February is not a trimming month.
February is not a trimming month. One of the reasons for that is it's the times when the trees are producing the most sap is what attracts the beetles that spread that. And so you have this time, think it as being springtime. That's one of the reasons that happens. And the other has to do with the temperature. When it's cold, the beetles aren't as active. When it's super hot, the beetles aren't as active.
Okay. We have a motion. And a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0.
Great.
Thank you very much, Randy. Item 8.3, public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive comments from members of the public on proposed amendments to Chapter 36 zoning to amend the Planning and Zoning Commission duties and procedures for zoning changes. It is now 7:35. Curtis, 7:25.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're a little unorthodox in how the public hearing is on the second reading, where this is the first reading. That was simply because we moved back the January P&Z and we couldn't meet the public notices. So I'll move through this again, even though you saw this presentation, just for the public here. This slide here in front of you was presented to Council back in November when we set out, we tasked Planning and Zoning to look at this ordinance. The goals were to define some key terms here, boundary and classification in the ordinance, which we have definitions for, clarify that Planning and Zoning does not initiate plat or rezoning actions, clarify takes council direction to initiate ordinance reviews, and clarify no special action is required by applicant. Planning and Zoning worked on this in the December and January meetings, as I alluded to, and then the first reading was in the January City Council. So we defined boundary and classification. These are key terms used for when determining when we mail out notices within 500 feet of people. Previously, those were not defined, and so it was up to us staff to try to just meet that. So that clearly says when we have to do those notices. There's the planning and zoning duties. This is the core of the amendments that you'll see, and the key things we're adding in front of these duties is upon application, planning and zoning, upon application, upon direction. We're adding those as prefixes to their state authorities, just clarifying that. And maybe the biggest one is upon direction of city council initiate, and that comes from our city attorney, which advises not common practice for planning and zoning commissions to initiate actions under state authority unless authorized by city ordinance. And last here was changes from our attorney, is that no one has to go through any special action, take any special action, no applicant, if they receive a recommendation of denial by the commission, because the city council is the final authority to whether or not it is approved. So we struck that, and then we added on this new subsection D, which is a 6-month cool-off period, because in that language we struck up at the top, which yes, come from the attorney, but there was a kind of cool-off of 6 months. We worked with attorneys. We added this basically to prevent, if city council votes no, that someone cannot, the very next day, resubmit the exact same application and somehow sort of try to gum up the system. And that concludes my presentation, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from our citizens? There being no questions from the citizens, it is now 7:28. It brings us to item 8.4, discussion action ordinance 2025-001, amending Chapter 36, zoning to amend Planning and Zoning Commission duties and procedures for zoning changes. This will be a final reading. Curtis, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Nothing else, Mayor.
Okay. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2025-001, amending Chapter 36, zoning to amend Planning and Zoning Commission duties and procedures for zoning changes. This will be a final reading. Do I have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion from Lee and a second from Conrad. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Item 8.5, discussion possible ordinance amendments to chapters 6, 8, 32, and 36 of the City of Chavano Park Code of Ordinances to define and allow limited all-weather surfaces, driveways, and parking in residential zoning districts. Curtis, you and Bill are both recognized on this to the extent needed. Please.
All right, well, if you recall, council, so this is a discussion item. We wanted to bring this back so you could see it has grown somewhat considerably from the initial time you saw this in November. And P&Z has kind of been working on several months, and they're kind of wrapping up their review work. And we thought it'd be good to have a read ahead for the council. And if you have any questions or concerns or whatever, we can get those addressed. So if you recall, in November city council meeting, it was motion to task planning and zoning to start this, and this was the slide that city council saw. What were the goals of this? And we showed this to planning and zoning when we started. We have this all-weather surface that we for parking on land, and we didn't define it, so that was very vague. In our code today, we have amend the code to ensure consistency for our regulations for parking across chapters. We didn't have consistency. We wanted to consider allowing obscured front faces garages and all these tear down rebuilds. We're starting to see this in these auto courtyards at the time that we were calling them, if you recall. And we wanted to remove definitions to their proper places. In the last couple months, planning and zoning is working. This is where staff, this slide kind of started off, just what I ran through. But where were we today with before any of these amendments that you can see red lines in your packet is we have a fairly vague prohibition on parking on grass. It's in one chapter, but in another. Driveways are allowed in one chapter, but missing in chapter 36, which is the only chapter where they should probably be. That's where we allow most construction of residential property. We allow all-weather surface or A1 lots under one chapter, but we miss in chapter 36, and there's no limits or requirements on it. Conceivably, someone could take their entire property and turn it into all-weather surface today. And A1s, we screen detached front-facing garage are allowed if approved by the building inspector, but the requirements are unclear in the ordinance. And this 1,000-foot view of these 30 pages that you have in your packet of where we're proposing kind of a setup, and then I'll highlight 3 major things I want to in all these changes. In the residential areas, we add in these proposed a clear prohibition to park on grass over 24 hours. So anything under 24 hours, perfectly fine. And it's in both chapters, it's consistent. We allow driveways in all residential areas, sort of a duh, but it's clearly stated and consistent throughout the code. And on lots greater than 0.9 acres, now not just A1, but 0.9 acres across the entire city and residential areas are allowed this additional all-weather surface parking. In the side and rear yards, we have a new definition, size limit requirements. And in the A1 district, we allow screen front faces garages with a screening device, which is defined by our code. You think of a fence or some sort of man-made fixture, you just can't put up a bush or something to block it. So 3 things I thought to highlight for council. Any questions you have on this, we can go through any of this, but 3 things I thought, big changes in this ordinance that P&Z is still working on. So the new all-weather surface definition, the regulations. So both these definitions up here are completely new. The blue and the red is more just to help draw your eyes to different things. So I'll just read our all-weather surface definition we have. So it is an uncovered, so I think you can't turn this into a giant carport. Dust-free stabilized ground cover for vehicular use or parking area. Surface with concrete, asphalt, brick, graded, and compacted gravel base or road base, interlocking pavers, or any similar dust-free stabilized materials approved by the building official. So that's the core in blue there. And then we come in red. Some important qualifiers. This definition does not include ground covers for non-vehicular use, sports courts, patios, sidewalks, other internal flat work. We didn't want to say that someone could look at this and say, oh, I can't do a tennis court now. A driveway that, and we come in and clarify, a driveway that extends from the side or rear yard into the side or rear yard from the front yard is not considered all-weather surface either. If someone has a side-loaded garage and their driveway takes a circuitous route around the building, that is not this all-weather surface. This is something else we're dealing with. Also, a driveway here, this definition, I wanted to highlight this. It says in our proposal, all driveways would, moving after July, we have July 1st, 2025 as a placeholder, but after the ordinance is passed and approved, all driveways moving forward be of concrete, asphalt, brick, or pavers. Existing gravel driveways would be fine, but a new driveway permit comes in, it would have to be constructed of these more permanent materials. And then you get into chapter 36, and all this red here, this is all new language. And you can see under that section 2 there, all the new requirements. If someone wants to do this all-weather surface, what we're proposing. We have, I won't run through them all, but we have location restrictions. You can have this in the side or rear yards, can't be in the front yard, can't be in building setbacks. We have a restriction requirement. Has to be at least 3 inches after compaction and thickness. So someone just can't do 1 inch of gravel, stomp on it, and say it's all-weather surface. Has to be engineered to some level. You can't cover it with a structure, so it prohibits turning we're in proposal 1,000 square feet. You can't have a 1,000 square foot giant carport. Basically cannot make the drainage worse. It can't be constructed in such a way to increase the flooding in other people's properties if there's a major waterway that flows through that part of your yard. We have size limits based upon the property size. So what we have now in a proposal, before there was no size limit, this proposal is if you're 0.9 to 1.9 acres, you get 600 square feet. All of this was based upon, if you're wondering where these are from, a standard or semi-standard 2-car garage. It's 24 by 24, like 484 feet. So we added a couple hundred extra square feet for turning, but otherwise it could be a very nice 2-car garage. Essentially, it's 600 square feet. Then we up it from 800 square feet to 1.9 to 2.9 acres, and then 1,000 square feet at 2.9 or greater. And we come in there and say residence driveway is not included in this size calculation. Again, this is not putting a size limit on people's driveways. This is additional all-weather surface, so they want to park additional cars on the property. We require screening, so it's obscured from the public, and you can't use it to store junk vehicles. And we reference our junk vehicle code. All right, second thing, this expanding, so today, in chapter 32, this additional all-weather surface where you could park, say, additional vehicles on your property, maybe to a detached garage somewhere else in your property, it's only allowed in A1. Planning and zoning says, well, what's the rationale for this originally, all in this A1? Well, they're the larger lots. Well, but there's larger lots across all residential zoning districts. Their proposal is 0.9 acres. So that list there is what, when I was working with planning and zoning, I tried to find 2 examples real quick of in each zoning district across the city that was over 1 acre, and then you can see what their possible sizes of additional pavement they could put on their property there. And those were just examples to help planning and zoning, the impact of their proposed change. So a lot of residents across the city would get this as a new possibility in our zoning code. Moving on to the third and last thing I'll highlight is we define and allow accessory structures. And I know we got away from parking here, and this is why it's good we wanted to bring this to you. This has grown quite a bit with this 31 pages and covering 4 chapters. While we were working on this, this was a good time while we were working planning and zoning, we were in the zoning chapter, to address something not in our code at all. We do not define accessory structures in our code at all today. We have accessory buildings, which is enclosed 4-wall building, customary incident to the principal building. So a building, you can think of building 4 walls and a roof. Accessory structure means in any freestanding constructed assembly designed to accommodate people and withstand loads, creating structures that may be open on 1 or more sides, have an open roof. We come up with examples. You can think of gazebos, pergolas, cabanas, bridges, pavilions. And then our definition ends by saying carports, porticocheers, animal stables, and accessory buildings not included in this definition. To clearly state what we're trying to regulate here. And how we're planning on treating them is so in our code today, someone could put an accessory building in the setback, width was 8 feet, but they could not put a pergola that maybe had an open roof and was open on 3 sides. And if the code allows someone to put a building, which could conceivably be 1,000 square feet and violate, enter into the setback, why wouldn't you let a open face structure? That was the logic behind it. And so everywhere where we're allowing accessory buildings, it's just accessory buildings and structures. So 20% of the rear yard, can't exceed 1 story, not greater than 8 feet height, inside setbacks. And then again, we come in at the end there, we say accessory buildings cannot be used for parking or storage of vehicle. That's why we were clear on for people, because we're not trying to make it so you put a carport right in the setback. So these are open face structures designed for people. And do you have a change log in your summary sheet of summary of all the changes? The 31 pages of track changes. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the 3 things I want to highlight for council tonight. So I'll conclude my presentation, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Curtis. We'll open this up for discussion. Anybody have any questions at this time, or do we want to come back next week or next time and discuss it in more detail? Pete?
And I will just say that we're probably 2 months from bringing it to you final. There's still a number of equations that Curtis and I are what-ifing and brainstorming, and we've got to really make sure that the size limits we're putting on this is not going to have unintended consequences. So,
That's kind of my question. So the parking lot that we're thinking about adding on the side, would this require it to have all-weather surface?
So what we're planning for our overflow parking is the hexagrid, so no, that would not meet this. No.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much, Curtis. Anything that you'd like to add, Bill, before we go to item number 9?
no, we got some work to do on it, but, wanted to get it in front of you so you could look at it, ask questions, and feel free to reach out to Curtis or I anytime in the next month or 2.
Okay. Brings us to item number 9. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
So-
moved.
Okay,
Second.
Maggie has made a motion to adjourn. Pete has seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. It's 7:40.